Miitopia is a goofy RPG with a bunch of unique mechanics that set it apart from most others. It also happens to be one of my favorite games of all time. But what happens when we strip one of these core mechanics from the game? Is it still possible to beat? Let's find out. Hello Luiginoids, this is LuigiXRules playing Miitopia for the first time on this channel. I love this game and have nearly completed it a couple of times, but every time I play it I end up doing it basically the same way. So I decided to do a challenge on it this time. For this challenge, I'm seeing if it's possible to beat Miitopia without buying any new weapons or armor. These things increase your Mii's stats, allowing them to deal more and take less damage. Without them, the battle should take a lot longer and be more difficult. But how much longer and more difficult? I guess you'll have to watch the video to find out. Let's get into the rules. Whenever a Mii asks for a weapon or piece of clothing in an inn, you have to ignore them. You cannot pick up pieces of equipment from the large yellow chests. Picking up gear from the roulette is fine, as long as you immediately sell it. Amiibo costumes and ragged clothing are also banned. To speed up this video, I'll only be talking about my party, bosses, and any enemies that are particularly threatening, which aren't much, by the way. Finally, I did this on the Switch version, which means we get to use the horse. I was considering banning it, but in the end I decided to allow it. Without further ado, let's begin. To start off, we need to pick a personality. Because we can't upgrade some of our stats normally, we need personalities with abilities that can make up those lost stat gains. Let's go in depth about how each one can be useful. I've always considered Kind to be kind of a useless personality. Two of its three unique abilities are identical to relationship abilities, and the third one where the Mii tries to spare an enemy is supposed to be the bad one. I mean, I guess having sacrifice early can be okay, but in the long run I don't think this will benefit me as much as the others, so I won't be making anyone kind in this playthrough. Energetic, on the other hand, straight up has no downsides. I'm serious. It can restore a friend's MP, stay alive after a lethal blow, and charge forward for extra damage. The only maybe downside is that the charge deals, get this, 2 damage to the Mii, which becomes negligible later in the game. Overall, this is definitely a personality that will be used, but not by me. Believe it or not, there's actually a better personality than this. Laidback is not that personality, in case you were wondering. Before concepting this challenge, I actually considered Laidback to be by far the worst personality in the game. I mean, almost half of its abilities make others mad at them, and on top of that, Miis with this personality only deal half damage with their attacks half the time. However, I eventually realized that getting unusually focused was actually extremely beneficial with the low amounts of damage we're dealing, and slacking off doesn't actually reduce the amount of damage they deal all that much. Because of this, it works very well with heavy magic attackers. It's still not the personality I'll be using, however. Now here's a good personality. Hitting harder with regular attacks, dodging physical attacks, and not being affected by status effects sometimes, that sounds good to me. Now, unlike Energetic, there is a downside. Cool will sometimes make the Mii not sacrifice themselves for others. In my opinion, however, that's not a big enough downside to make this not the best personality in the game. Now, it's less effective on magic attackers, but for physical attackers, this personality rocks. And so, it'll be the one I use for this run. You know what? I'm kinda getting sick of talking about personalities. We'll cover the rest when we get to them. What's more important now is the job we have. Since I made myself cool, I should use a physical attacker like the warrior or thief, right? Well, I actually decided to go with the pop star for Greenhorne. My logic was that the pop star is relatively frail, so dodging attacks through sacrifice refusals and dodging them was a pretty good idea. Realistically, I should have made myself a physical attacker, but whatever. Anyway, time for the first boss already. Mini Alien Slime. This boss is the first one, fought before you can even buy new gear, so it's made to be defeated with any job personality combo. Naturally, it was very easy. Shortly afterwards, we get our second party member. I decided to make Otherworld an energetic warrior because of the extra damage he deals with charge. I didn't make it cool because of the whole not sacrificing thing, but realistically that's not that big of a deal, so I should have made him cool. Anyway, he performs in combat pretty well, as we can see by our next boss, Butterfly Peter. Otherworld deals twice as much damage as I do, so it makes sense just to keep spamming Encore until the butterfly goes down. Now that we're at an inn, I feel it's important to mention that we can still buy HP bananas and MP candies. However, we cannot buy new weapons or armor. Because of this, gold has little purpose in this run. Also, we want as high of a relationship with everyone as possible so that we can have as many beneficial skills as possible. Lastly, food. This is also an essential part of this run, as certain types can increase attack, magic, and defense, which if you didn't know are the stats that weapons and armor increase. Sadly, one of the theoretical bests, Goblin Ham, seems to be commonly disliked. No matter, we can always eat something else later. Alright, 2 new party members to go over. The next new one I made was Jesus, the laid-back mage, and the other one was Mario, the stubborn chef. As I mentioned earlier, laid-back is really good for magic attackers like the mage. However, I have not talked about stubborn yet, so let's go over that now. At first, stubborn seems like a very useful personality. It can do 2 attacks in 1 turn and can reduce the damage it takes. However, there is one glaring weakness that makes me hesitant to use it. Its refusal to accept healing. Getting healed is extremely important because of how much damage we're going to be taking, so the fact that stubborn Mies can refuse it is pretty bad. However, this is not an issue if you make the healers themselves stubborn. So I made the chef stubborn because it's a healer and because its double attacks can be pretty useful. Actually, there's something really weird about stubborn and flambe, one of the chef's moves. Flambe is actually unique in that it's the only skill that pincer can be used with. Because of this, I think the game treats flambe as a buffed up basic attack. So when stubborn's again triggers, the chef will just do a regular attack instead of using flambe again. Pretty weird, huh? Anyway, enough explaining. Time to take on more bosses. I'll have to take on the mouse in the forest first, because I thought you had to go that way to obtain the 4th party member. As it turns out, you get them the next time you visit an inn after meeting Great Sage Hank Hill. I've always considered Nicky Mouse to be a pretty formidable foe, even with gear, because she can hit multiple party members at once. So it's even more stressful in this challenge. In fact, Mario was still only level 2 when I got there. Surprisingly, I actually managed to beat it on my first try, mostly because Jesus kept becoming unusually focused. Hopefully the next bosses won't be so difficult. Next up is Rocky Triaris. Like Nicky Mouse, he can hit multiple party members at once, so you've always got to be ready to use HP sprinkles. Thanks to Diligent Sprinkle use and Encore spam, I managed to defeat him rather easily. Real quick before we get to the next boss, outing tickets were introduced in the switchboard and make boosting relationship levels and obtaining HP bananas and MP sweets easier. Okay, time for the next boss. Imp Jigglypuff is next, and she hits rather hard, just like most bosses in this challenge. Even though she can only hit 1 Mii at a time, I still ended up with less health in this battle. This is even with using the safe spot for healing quite often. Luckily though, I powered through, so it's on to the castle. At this point, you're probably wondering why I went to those big chest levels when I can't collect them. Well, that's because I like to get the gold flag on every level before moving on. That's just how I play. This means these battles could be even more difficult if I didn't grind for those gold flags. Okay, one last thing before the next boss. The horse. As I mentioned earlier, I considered banning the horse for this challenge. However, I eventually decided that I might need it later, and I could always just not bring him along if I ever decided to make this challenge too easy. So we added Darkrai to the team. Alright, after a bunch of story stuff and some grinding in the woods, it's time for Burger King Golem. Here's where my lack of equipment really starts to make a difference. At the start of the battle, Jesus wasn't at full HP, so he died in 1 hit. Surprisingly, despite how much damage we've been taking this whole time, this was the first time one of my party members died. I tried to use the safe spot and HP sprinkles to keep the rest of my team healed, but eventually Mario went down. Luckily though, Toadrules managed to pull through and kill the first difficult boss in the run. After a quick excursion to retrieve Trollface for Princess Peach, it's time to go to the Arid Frontier. Here's where we get our first difficult regular enemy, the Mole. This thing hits really hard and can sometimes dodge our already weak attacks. Grinding in this area is a pain because of this. Anyway, now it's time to fight the Griffin. At this point, my Mii's relationship levels are high enough that they can help each other attack and dodge attacks, so it wasn't as difficult as it could have been. Now, it still hits pretty hard, so you still got to be on alert with the sprinkles. However, compared to the Golem, this thing is a piece of cake. The Naughty Imp is next, and while it hits hard, it also makes your Mii's evil, creating the perfect opportunity for them to heal in the safe spot. This guy actually nearly killed me, as in my Mii, so it was harder than the Griffin, but it still wasn't the hardest fight in the world. For some reason, on our way to the final fight of Greenhorne, Jesus became unusually focused a ton. Also, he demonstrates just how good praise is along the way. Other than that, there are a lot of split paths, so that means there's lots of grinding done in Nightmare Tower. Now, time for the final boss of Greenhorne, General Peach. Let's go through the motions again. She hits hard, use HP sprinkles, I spammed Encore. Oh, here's something new. Mounted attack actually does decent damage to her. Because of that, I was able to defeat her, but man, this boss took a while. I fear for what the Realm of the Fae is going to be like. Before we get to Neksdor, there's one final jaunt we have to take, and it's actually surprisingly difficult. Jesus learned Sleep Tight, so he likes to spam that when his allies are at half health instead of, attacking. This made this jaunt a lot more difficult than it realistically should have been. Finally, it's time to enter a new area. Don't worry, this place is much shorter than Greenhorne. There's not actually any bosses or particularly tough enemies before the first boss though, so let's get a rundown on the team for this area. I am still cool, obviously, but I had to pick a new job, so I went with the Thief. The Thief is like the Pop Star in that its basic attack hits all enemies. So, when combined with Cool, you can start dealing a lot of damage, even without getting new weapons. Hang on, real quick, before the rest of the team, when I first became the thief, the roulette wheel had a huge chance of getting me a bunch of HP bananas, so I decided to spend all of my tickets on that so that I'll never run out of HP bananas again. Anyway, back to the party. Second ended up being 9-Volt, the laid-back scientist. He's laid back for the same reason that Jesus was, in case he becomes unusually focused. Third is Zelda, the stubborn cleric. My original plan was to make all healers stubborn, but honestly, energetic might be pretty good for the cleric, especially when combined with Giga Resurrection, which I doubt we'll get on this playthrough, and Last Wish. Clerics don't actually heal all that much until they get Mega Cure, especially when they aren't getting new stabs, so HP bananas are still largely used for healing. Clerics do deal decent damage for healers, though. Lastly is Dr. Eggman, the unfittingly cautious imp. Cautious hasn't been explained yet, so let's go over that right now. Cautious is a great personality because it doesn't really have many downsides either. They can whip out extra HP bananas and MP candies, finish off an enemy with low health, and even deal more damage at the cost of stalling their turn. At first I thought that this waited until their next turn, but nope, they just take their turn last. This can be bad if an enemy would have normally attacked after the Cautious me, but when combined with an already slow and tanky class like the Imp, it really doesn't seem like a downside. Just don't make yourself cautious. You only have access to the finisher when you control a Cautious me. Okay, after completing every path in the underground maze, which takes up a good chunk of Neksdor by the way, it's time to take on the Minotaur. I don't have any attacking skills yet, so I try to use Booby Trap to minimize the amount of damage I take. While I could just rely on cool dodging, Booby Trap has the added benefit of dealing damage to the enemy. Thankfully, Dr. Eggman whips out a very useful ability, Sweet Whispers. This makes an enemy calm, which lowers their defense. This is especially good in a challenge where we can't deal much damage. As always, make sure you keep your team healed and able to use skills with sprinkles. This is especially important if the Minotaur decides to use its sweep attack. Other than that though, the Minotaur should go down pretty easily thanks to Sweet Whispers and mounted attack. Before the first boss the Dark Lord created, I've got another annoying enemy to talk about. The Evil Mole. It's basically a more difficult mole. Thankfully, both times I encountered it, 9-Volt came through with his unusual focus. They would have been a real pain without him. Alright, the next boss is up to me, so I decided to finish up the underground maze by fighting Lily. It's mostly the same as the Minotaur in terms of strategy. Set booby traps, heal when necessary, thank you Sweet Whispers. Now you do have to be careful about regular attacks, as those can sometimes cause you to take damage instead of dealing it. Other than that, if you pay attention, this boss is pretty easy. Next up is Waluigi Cobra. Booby Trap and Sweet Whispers are basically a given at this point, so let's move on to new stuff. He likes to call for help, so my regular attack and 9-Volt's unstable formula make the extra Cobras a non-issue, especially if 9-Volt gets unusually focused. Zelda still isn't healing much though. Hopefully she'll be more useful when she gets Mega Cure. Really, this fight was pretty easy. On to the next one. Oddly, this next one is just a repeat of that Lily fight we had earlier, only it's Amy this time. There are a couple of new things here, however. We've got some glyphs to deal with, and I whip out my first attacking skill, Whirlwind Blades, for the first time in a boss fight. Other than that, the same strategies apply as last time. Now, for the last one before the big boss of Neksdor, Sus Shield and Pancake Sword. These two actually have an interesting dynamic, where the shield will take damage for the sword, and the sword will attack with the shield. Because of this, we've got to be extra diligent with our sprinkles this time. Luckily, Ignite and Whirlwind Blades can still hit the sword, so between those and Sweet Whispers, we can take this down. I wish more enemies had dynamics like these two. And yes, there's the kind golems, but my footage for them looks like this, so I can't really describe them for you. And now for the final boss of Neksdor, Pharaoh Goomba. He has a ton of health, and his attacks hit multiple Miis at once, but that's not the scary part. No, the part we've got to pay attention to is his curses. These will make the affected Miis give away their HP bananas, so for this battle we've got to use the safe spot a ton. Just like with General Peach, this battle is really an endurance challenge. Luckily, because of the safe spot and get well soon, we didn't run out of sprinkles. However, we came really close. With enough patience and attention, Pharaoh Goomba can be taken out. However, I'm still worried about the final boss of the Realm of the Fae. Just like last time, there's still a bunch of enemies until we get to the next area. However, unlike last time, they aren't that big of a deal, so we can just grab our Royal Roast and head on to the dreaded Realm of the Fae. Once again, our job was reset, so I had to pick a new one. This time I went with the cat because it's a really good physical attacker, so it works well with Cool. And I know I haven't really been talking about food much, but similar to how we got a bunch of HP bananas right before Neksdor, we got a whole lot of cheesecake, one of the best food items in the game. Sadly, I only like it a neutral amount. Oh well, here's hoping one of our new teammates likes cheesecake. Speaking of, new area means new jobs, new skills, new enemies, and new party members. Our first one is Thor, the Stubborn Flower. I actually considered not using the flower in favor of an energetic cleric because of its late game tendency to spam flower power, but in the end I decided to just use it and see what happens. And actually, Thor happens to love cheesecake, so I guess I know where all of it's going. The next new party member is Baymax, the cautious tank. Cautious is definitely the best personality for a tank, as it doesn't gain speed naturally, so the whole delaying a turn thing doesn't really come into play very often. And our last party member is... Warning, the youngest Fab Fairy. Yeah, we've actually got to fight a boss before we get to the next permanent party member, so let's just get a move on to Citrus Cave. Thanks in part to Warning's dancing arrow, Citrus Cave goes by pretty easily, so let's get to the boss, Arachno Frisk. She likes to spit out spiders to inhibit our Miis, so be sure to use that safe spot. During this fight, we can see just how good the cat is. Its Sharpened Claws ability lets its next attack deal seemingly double damage, so when you combine that with Cat's Paw, you can start racking up damage fast. Now, she does deal quite a bit of damage, but we have enough HP sprinkles at this point that she really isn't that difficult. Alright, now that we're in Big Forest, it's time for our final party member, Eevee, the Air-Headed Princess. Since we haven't gone over Air-Headed yet, let's do that now. Admittedly, I wasn't 100% sure on whether Air-Headed would be the best personality to use. I mean, it's not terrible. Sacrificing your turn to distract an enemy and dealing more damage to an undesired target aren't the worst abilities in the world. It's just, most of the time, something like cool or laid back is the better choice. For the princess, however, I didn't really have a set-in-stone personality, so I went with Air-Headed just to try it out. Oh yeah, and the princess is actually a pretty good job. You can distract enemies, dodge attacks, and even make them take more damage later down the line. And if it needs to attack, Royal Wave does a decent amount of damage. Now, it's a bit of a frail job, but we're all frail anyway, so it doesn't really matter all that much. Before we get to the boss of Big Forest, we've got the next difficult enemy, the Hobgoblin. Its sweep attack can be rather devastating, so when there's two of them, they can rack up damage fast. Make sure you're diligent with the sprinkles all throughout Big Forest. Okay, now for the next boss, Isabelle. Her main gimmick is a somewhat new status, Distraction. This functions identically to Sweet Whispers, where the affected person takes more damage from attacks. However, it doesn't actually inhibit our attacks in any way, so as long as we've got enough sprinkles, we don't really need to go to the safe spot. Plus, Frisk actually comes in handy with her counter arrow ability. While Baymax ended up dying, Isabelle wasn't really that much of a threat, especially with the Sharpened Claws Cat's Paw combo. At this point, the Dark Lord steals a bunch of faces from the Elven Retreat, so it's time for Isabelle to join us as we get them back. The first of these I decided to take on was the Tomato Bros. In this battle, two Miis will hate tomato juice and takes tons of damage from it, while the other two will love it and heal from it. At least it seems like it's always 2 and 2 whenever I fight this boss. Anyway, it also attacks multiple party members at once with its regular attack. Luckily, we really don't have to worry about healing all that much because Isabelle can use Healing Melody to cure us. So, between that and Bluster and Royal Wave dealing decent enough damage, the Tomato Bros weren't very difficult. Sadly, Baymax does not really seem to be dealing all that much damage yet. I didn't realize just how much food was increasing my attack. For the next boss, it's back to Citrus Cave as we battle Butterfly Darkness. Her sweep attack deals quite a bit of damage, but other than that, she's not too special. Really, this is an endurance challenge, as she takes quite a few hits to take down. It's a good thing that Baymax can deal somewhat decent damage when he takes his time. Now it's time to go back to Big Forest to take on Hat Kid Slime. It only does basic attacks, but those basic attacks hit multiple Miis at once. So, as always, make sure you pay attention and use those sprinkles. Thankfully, at this point, we've got multiple ways to deal damage and avoid attacks, so there's really not much else to say about this boss. And now, after completing Lotus Lake, which has an amazing song, by the way, that's what I've been playing this whole time, it's time to take on the final boss of the Realm of the Fae, Warning Frog. She has 2 tadpoles with her, but those are mostly there just to distract the AI. The real threat is, of course, Warning Frog herself. Her splash attack is actually rather powerful, so as always, stay on top of those HP sprinkles. Luckily, her other attack isn't all that dangerous. It can easily be healed either with sprinkles or Isabelle's healing melody, so don't worry about that. If anything, it wastes some of her turns as she sucks in breath. I did almost run out of sprinkles, but as long as I kept attacking, she goes down relatively easy. Now it's time for the final last hurrah. It's pretty simple, although some battles can take a while. Finally, it's time to head to Karkaton and take out the Dark Lord once and for all. Once again, I'm by myself, but this time my job didn't get reset, so there wasn't anything special in the arcade. On the battlefield, however, is a different story. Because my level wasn't reset, the game expects me to be able to fend for myself. And while one enemy isn't a problem, as soon as there's 2, things can get ugly fast. For this one instance, I decided to forego completing all of the paths until rescuing the first set of party members. This, of course, was made easier by Great Sage Hank Hill joining us for these bosses. His Tower of Flame deals massive damage to a single enemy, which is luckily what all of these first 2 bosses end up being. He also has a lightning attack, although it doesn't hit multiple enemies, unlike the mage's lightning. And he can heal me, which is nice. Anyway, let's get on with the bosses. I decided I needed to go for a more permanent healer first, so I went and fought Magma Mario Slime. He takes away almost half of my HP with one attack, so HP sprinkles are really important here, especially since by me dying would instantly lose the fight. This, however, was made much easier with a very powerful attack combination. Sharpened Claws and Hoarse Whispering. Hoarse Whispering's exact effects depend on the job you're using when you activate it, but it always takes all of your MP and it's usually pretty useful. With the cat, it attacks one enemy 5 times for pretty good damage. Since Sharpened Claws increases the damage of the next attack, that means it can deal as much as 350 damage at this point in the game. So yeah, Magma Mario Slime wasn't really a challenge at all. Now Mario's back, and he instantly makes me mad at him. Glad to have you back, Mario. Let's just get to the next boss, which is Pain Cloud Eevee. Dang, look at how much damage he's dealing. I hope her stats change when I have more party members, because there is no way I would have been able to do this well on my own. Luckily, Mario's there to take some hits and heal some HP, although he still only has home cooking, which doesn't ever increase how much it heals. I didn't even get the chance to use Hoarse Whispering this time, so I had to suffer through this legitimately. In the end, though, thanks to the Sprinkles and Hank Hill, I was somehow able to beat this boss. But hoo-wee, that was stressful! The final fight of this saving section is Burning Dr. Eggman Golem, and now I'm convinced these guys change their stats depending on what order you fight them in. By a huge stroke of luck, the horse came to me on turn 2, so I was able to immediately use my Sharpened Claws Hoarse Whispering combo, which instantly killed it. Now, of course, my other team members dealt some damage too, but surely you can see now just how good Hoarse Whispering is. The AI isn't allowed to use it, sadly, although that's probably so that they don't waste all their MP in one go. But if they did, I'd definitely have to ban the horse, so for this challenge, it's a good thing. Now that we've rescued the first batch of Miis, I decided to take on the Blue Minotaurs, even though it's just an optional boss. You'll see that I switched to the Thief for this battle, just because I unlocked the ability to, and I've never really used the Thief that much. Obviously, I start off with Booby Trap, and Mario's dead already. You see, this is why you've got to be diligent with your sprinkles. Luckily, we've got Dr. Eggman back, so Sweet Whispers lets us deal more damage. This comes in handy when I get to use Hoarse Whispering as the Thief. It attacks all enemies and has an apparent 50-50 chance of stealing food from each enemy. It seems pretty useful. Of course, I almost ran out of sprinkles, but Hank Hill saved the day with his Tower of Flame. Geothermal pizza time! When we enter Karkaton, we're met with a split-up section. I partnered with Mario, Hank Hill, and Darkrai, while Dr. Eggman and Eevee are left to fend for themselves. And it turns out that they can't really fend for themselves, so pay extra attention to their health. It's the only thing you can really do during this section. Okay, time for the next party member unlocking boss, Cerberus. The big thing in this battle is that we unlock Hyper Sprinkles. These sprinkles greatly increase a Mii's physical attack, but makes it so they can only do basic attacks against a random enemy. Sadly, we don't really have any good physical attackers right now. The closest is Mario, who's our healer. Since he still only has home cooking, though, I decided it would be worth it to let them be hyper. Other than that, same rules apply. Keep track of your Mii's HP so they don't die, which I didn't, and keep on attacking. Eevee's new Blindfold ability actually helped quite a bit here, what with her blocking the nightmares early on. Thanks to Sweet Whispers and Tower of Flame, we were able to get past Cerberus without getting too close to losing. Now that we've got 7 party members, Hank Hill decides to leave us, so we can't rely on Tower of Flame anymore. Oh well, hopefully Jesus, Zelda, and Baymax will prove to be useful. Oh yeah, and with so many party members, I decided to start building the relationships with my final teams. Finally, those outing tickets I've been getting could be put to use. There aren't any more bosses on the way to the Dark Lord's castle, so I guess it's time to finally go inside. I mean, I guess there were a couple of Dark Griffins, but Zelda just blasted them out of existence. Anyway, inside the castle, I get to try out the Popstar's Hoarse Whispering. It fully heals my Miis and makes them all hyper, which isn't necessarily a great thing when it comes to magic attackers like Dr. Eggman, but it seems like it could come in handy. Inside of the castle, we get our next tough enemy, the Clever Imp. It has a powerful one-hit magic attack and a lot of HP. Not too remarkable, but it keeps you on your toes. Time for the first boss of the castle, 9-Volt Demon. I decided to bring in Baymax, Mario, and Dr. Eggman for this battle because, well, you'll see it later. His regular attacks can two-shot my party, but he often wastes an attack trying to make my party nervous. He has 2 naughty imps with him, which are honestly more annoying, what with their making my party evil and hitting not softly. Luckily, we get to see a great ability of the horses here, which I have neglected to mention until now for some reason, Snipe. It attacks all enemies proportionally to your magic stat, but even if you're a physical attacker, it still deals decent damage. With it, the naughty imps go down pretty quickly. Once he's close to being alone, I began to use Hyper Sprinkles on Baymax, partially because he's a physical attacker and partially so that he'd stop using Wild Shot and hurting his comrades. Since I decided to be a pop star for this battle, I decided to use a new strategy. Encore plus Hyper Sprinkles. It worked well enough when Baymax got praised too, I guess. In the end, we got past this battle with about as much difficulty as the previous battles. Just remember to use HP Sprinkles and all that jazz. Oh yeah, I guess I should have mentioned the party was split up. Yeah, I probably would have used Zelda, a better healer with her new Mega Cure, in that battle. But she got split up from us, along with Jesus and Eevee. Those are all magic attackers or supporters. That doesn't sound like it would end well. Also, yes, they gave one side more party members and the horse. Why are these split paths so weighted towards one side? Alright, time for this calamity of a boss. Study of Thor. Because he's a painting, the party will often stop and admire him instead of attacking him. This results in them taking quite a bit of damage, since these are frailer classes. The only thing going for us is that they don't take too much damage from his all-hit attack, but that's not saying much. For some reason I decided to not complete all the paths and just try this boss. So Jesus doesn't even have Mega Fire yet. We can survive for quite a while with HP Sprinkles, but after we ran out I thought we were doomed. I had to resort to using the safe spot after a while, which luckily actually heals quite a bit. Despite everything going against this team, I actually managed to beat it first try. But let me tell you, this took a long time. This is definitely a battle of endurance, and I feel like that's only going to get worse as the game goes on. Before we get to saving the last party member, we've got a really tough enemy to deal with, the Fiend. This imp is notorious for one-shotting your party members. In this battle, we had to fight 2 of them at the same time. These guys are oftentimes very luck-based. You have to hope that they don't OHKO your reviver and waste enough attacks hitting you for minor damage. I was able to defeat these ones, but I was getting pretty close to failing. Now for the final party member boss, Otherworld armor. For this battle I was a thief and brought along 9-Volt, Jesus, and Thor because they were the lowest levels on my team. Yeah, I probably could have thought that through a bit better. Anyway, he's not that big of a deal by himself. Yes, he hits somewhat hard, but that's the norm at this point. No, what you've really got to watch out for is the Spirit Sword. This thing has even more attack than Otherworld's armor, attacks twice each turn, and can even attack with Otherworld's armor and the Spirit Shield. This thing is a beast, so take it out quickly. Sadly, Otherworld's armor can summon more, so you've just got to keep taking them down. This is a lot easier when you make a Thief Hyper or when Horsewhip Spring kicks in. Jesus died a couple of times, but that just really meant I could get angry off of revenge and attack a me does when a comrade dies. Really, it was just the constant barrage of attacks that was difficult, so guess what? You've got to be diligent with HP Sprinkles! In the end I won, so we finally got Otherworld back! Besides a couple Blue Minotaurs and a Hyper Thief showcase, there's not really much to talk about before the next boss. So let's just get to it. The next boss is the Dragon, and boy, let me tell you, this one's a doozy. He doesn't seem so bad at first, since his multi-hit attack doesn't deal that much damage. However, he's able to spam it pretty easily, so as always, stay on top of your HP Sprinkles. This only gets you so far though, is you can actually run out of Sprinkles pretty quickly and have to start relying on the safe spot for healing. Luckily, Zelda has a revive with a pretty good success rate, so if you have a cleric, prioritize keeping them healthy. To make this battle easier, you can make single hit attackers like the Cat and Warrior Hyper, but that's also not a guaranteed win. I was actually only a few turns away from losing as I finally used my life sprinkle, but I somehow managed to beat this boss on the first try. For the final stretch before the Dark Lord, you're going to need to be on your toes, as several Blue Minotaurs and a Fiend or 2 become the norm. If you can get past them though, you can fight one of the longest fights so far, Dark Lord Mondays. The first phase is actually fairly similar to the Dragon, as he likes to use his multi-hit attack a lot. The difference here is that he will often waste a turn giving me a nightmare or attack one me for pretty huge damage. I really hate to say this again, but you've really got to be diligent with your HP Sprinkles in order to survive. Honestly, I think I got pretty bad luck during the first phase, as Jesus kept on slacking off. He could have dealt decent damage, but no, he decided to only deal 30 instead. Anyway, once you get him down to half health, he starts taking your Mii's faces and putting them on pretty powerful imps. Good news is, they only attack one Mii, you can easily put the faceless Miis into the safe spot, and the Dark Lord stops attacking while they're out. However, the faceless Miis can't do anything, so you'll still want to get them back. Once the imps are gone, the Dark Lord resumes almost one-shotting Jesus, and generally being annoying. You can also summon more imps later, so be ready for that. While the fight is long, I'd argue that it's not quite as difficult as the Dragon, as once a Mii gets hit by a single hit attack, you can easily counteract the damage by putting him into the safe spot. Again, I was able to beat it on my first try, but I really had to be paying attention the entire time. Now it's time to go into the second half of the game. I mean, it's not really half, because, just look at the video length, but whatever. After some crisis and befriending, it's time to start exploring Miitopia to its fullest. We always have a partner exploring with us, which technically isn't new, but it helps as they get to clock in extra damage while not being able to be attacked themselves. Also, Miis can get sick now, forcing you to use all of your Miis at some point so that you don't just stick with the 4 you like. Finally, pretty much every enemy requires the same attention you would give a boss. They're not the most difficult things in the world, but they do take a while, and if you're not on top of your sprinkles, even these regular enemies can be quite a hassle. But enough about that, let's just get to the bosses. First up is the Yeti and the Gantu weights. Get it? Anyway, this guy can freeze your Miis with a sweep attack or deal massive damage with a single strike. Remember to use your safe spot in sprinkles as always. Also remember to use hyper sprinkles on your single hit attackers for them to deal pretty good damage. I decided to try out sneak attack during this battle, but it really only deals slightly more damage than whirlwind blades, takes 2 turns to activate, and prevents you from using friendship skills for a turn. So I stuck with whirlwind blades and booby trap. Also during this battle I realized that energetics charge may not be as good of an ability as I thought it was. Finally, our helper this time was a cleric, so we didn't have to worry about HP as much. This boss was pretty much like all of the others. Not too hard, but keeps you on your toes. The next stop is Peculia, and it introduces an especially difficult enemy, the Running Nose. It often attacks multiple Miis for pretty significant damage, so as I said before, make sure you use your sprinkles diligently. Anyway, time for the next boss, the Hamburger. He starts with 2 slices of bread, and yikes, that's a lot of damage. The bread slices aren't really an issue, but the hamburger itself is powerful and can take away one of your Mii's turns by swallowing them. Insert sprinkles comment here. While he may deal good damage, Eevee can deal quite a bit of damage herself by using Double Royal Wave. If you have any single hit attackers, make sure you keep them hyper so that you maximize your damage. Other than that, there's not much new to say, just pay attention and you'll do fine. And now for our final new area for a bit, Nimbus. Again, at this point assume every regular enemy is a hassle and it takes a while to defeat. Let's just get to the next boss, Rabid UFO. Obviously he deals a ton of damage with his regular attack, but he also sometimes steals our HP bananas. Since I haven't been relying on them for a while, that's not too bad. In fact, I actually used Pilfer to try and get him to waste more turns stealing our bananas. This boss really isn't too difficult, although that might be because I had a mage as a special guest and Dr. Eggman used Sweet Whispers. Seriously, Sweet Whispers might be the most underrated ability in the game. Either way, I took him down without too much trouble. Now we get to explore all the new areas again, although this time we're searching for gems to open up the Skyscraper. This part of the game introduces non-permanent areas such as the Underground Labyrinth and Gantu Cave. Since these areas don't stay, I typically don't grind out all the pads in these levels, so maybe some bosses will actually be a challenge. The first one I take on is the Mistake Wolf of the Wisp. Sadly, we no longer have special guests during bosses, so we're on our own this time. Obviously, it packs quite a punch, like every boss, but it has something unique that makes it extra difficult. It can heal itself for quite a bit of its HP. So, despite the fact that we were doing decent damage throughout the battle with Hyper Tank and cat hits and having Zelda there to heal, I actually lost for once. Part of that, I think, is the fact that Baymax made almost everybody mad at him, and the fact that Zelda died pretty early on, but man, this clip shows just how quickly things can go haywire. Honestly, it's also probably because we run out of HP sprinkles quicker now thanks to our ever-increasing HP stats, but still, a loss is a loss. The second attempt goes much better. I replaced Baymax with Otherworld, our warrior, so that we can deal even more damage per turn. And it's a significant amount of damage too. I guess I never realized how much of the tank's attack stat was its weapon. Other factors that may have contributed to this battle's success were a higher friendship level so that Pinsir could be used, and paying more attention to Zelda's HP so that she can survive. Really though, just changing one party member made this fight so much easier. Baymax isn't really holding his weight right now. I might have to fix that later. Anyway, the next boss during this sequence is Robo Lenny. This battle is actually pretty great as it introduces our final saving grace, the Shield Sprinkles. These things will nullify one hit on a Mii, which is pretty awesome. Sadly, we only ever get 5 of them, but that doesn't matter too much right now, as that's easily enough to last this battle. Actually, this battle is pretty easy, as it basically just serves as a Shield Sprinkles tutorial. I don't think I was ever in danger of losing the battle at any point. That's partially thanks to Lend a Hand, which is actually starting to deal quite a bit of bonus damage. In the end, this battle isn't very interesting. Let's get on with some more interesting ones. The last challenge before we get to the Skyscraper is Ice Queen Kronk. She introduces the return of heavy-hitting multi-attack moves, although it's honestly not too bad, and can make your Miis evil. However, I looked out and had every single instance of becoming evil blocked by a 9-volt safety mask. During this battle, I learned just how powerful the Encore Hyper Warrior strategy could be. It honestly makes this battle fairly trivial as well. Just, you know, be diligent with sprinkles and all that. Now, on to the Skyscraper. We're in the home stretch now, and if you think that this challenge has gotten a bit easy, then oh boy, you ain't seen nothing yet. To start off, we've got some very powerful enemies, the crystals. These things deal tons of damage for a regular enemy, and the regular crystals have immense physical defense. In fact, they can almost one-shot some of my weaker defense Miis. If this is the new standard for regular enemies, then I can't imagine how the bosses must be in this place. Alright, there's a ton of bosses in the Skyscraper, so bear with me for a bit. The first one on the list is Monday's Phantom of Evil. This is a refight of the Dark Lord, except stronger of course. Its attacks are the same, although he thankfully can't rip your Mii's faces off and stick them on an imp. He mostly likes to lure your Mii's into a nightmare and hit everyone at the same time, so make sure you're ready with the safe spot. I ended up running out of sprinkles fast, so I definitely used the safe spot quite a bit. As for strategies I used, I pretty much just spammed Booby Trap the whole time because I was the thief. Dr. Eggman was useful with his sweet whispers as always, and Eevee actually deals a good amount of damage with double Royal Wave. Honestly, this probably could have gone by a bit smoother with a hyper-physical attacker, but I did manage to beat it with this non-optimal team. It was stressful though. If this is how all bosses are going to be, then my nerves have their work cut out for them. Next up, we've got a split-up section, and at the end of each path, there's a boss. For the first path, we have to fight Strong Burger King Golem and Gold General Peach. Gold General Peach is the real threat here, as her charge punch deals a ton of damage. The problem is, the Golem likes to block incoming damage for her. We see some new multi-hit skills in this battle, including one that makes Baymax not hurt allies, which is really neat. After we fought the Phantom of Evil, Monday's joined us as just some normal guy. While those attacks are pathetic, he can provide HP bananas to injured Mii's during his turn, so healing isn't really a problem in this fight. Gold General Peach ended up going down first, and after I got the good old Sharpened Claws Horse Spring combo, the Golem went down easily. And I feel like that's a good summary of this battle right there. Easy. On the other path, we've got to fight Pharaoh Goomba. The second. Really creative name there. Anyway, this fight's not even worth talking about, since we had the option of a Hyper Warrior. I guess it's worth mentioning that he can still curse us, but just put them in the safe spot and you can cure it, plus bonus healing. But yeah, compared to most of the other fights around this time, this fight is really easy. Finally for the Skyscraper is Red Warning Frog and its minions, Frisk Pole and Isabelle Pole. The frog shares the same gimmick as the one before. It takes a few turns to suck in breath before breathing it out again. This attack of course deals a lot of damage, but it's not really too much more than their regular attacks. The tadpoles go down easily enough, and after a pop star horse whispering makes everyone hyper, the frog goes down soon enough. I guess I should say use your sprinkles in the safe spot and all that as well. Really though, this fight isn't the hardest thing in the world so long as you don't let anyone die. Now that we're in the Otherworld, it's time for the big finale, the Darkest Lord himself. He's got 3 phases, the left hand, right hand, and main body. For the left hand, I decided to put Toad-Rules, Mario, and 9V against it. The left hand mostly uses physical attacks, so high defense Mii's like Toad-Rules can last quite a while against it. However, we're finally going to do something different with our strategy, not use too many sprinkles. You see, the amount of sprinkles you have left carries over throughout all phases of the boss, so if you use them up early, you won't be able to use them during the actual hard parts. So I just let Mario and 9V do most of the healing while Hyper Toad-Rules deal most of the damage. As for the right hand, I put Thor, Dr. Eggman, and Baymax against it. It mostly uses special attacks, so Baymax might not have been the best choice, but I wanted some physical attacker for this phase. This phase was the one I wanted to use shield sprinkles on, but when I ran out, I had to resort to using the safe spot. As it turns out though, the hand's attacks don't harm some of the Mii's as much as I thought it would. I could have used more hyper sprinkles on Baymax, but I wanted to save the rest for the final phase, so I just let him be angry instead. Before long, this hand goes down. Finally, the main body. If you've been keeping track, I brought myself, Jesus, Zelda, and Eevee. I made myself the cat, mostly for the Sharpened Claws horse whispering thing. By the way, you're forced to use the horse during this phase. The Dark Lord can summon 6 coins throughout the battle that use the faces of the Mii's that fought at the previous phases. While that does use up one of his turns, the coins are arguably scarier than him, as they always deal loads of damage during their turns. Not that the Darkest Lord doesn't deal a bunch of damage, but he can also use his turns for summoning the coins or giving Mii's nightmares. He can even override praise with these nightmares. That sucks. After the coins are gone, the Darkest Lord starts using a high damage multi-hit attack that eats up our sprinkles pretty quickly. They especially go after he uses his reduce everyone to 1 HP attack. Really though, the battle started to go downhill and I wasn't careful enough to let myself die, while hyper. I might have been able to dig myself out of this, but then the Darkest Lord reduced everyone's HP to 1 again, which I didn't even realize he could do. After that, it was pretty much over. Resurrection just doesn't revive our Mii's with enough HP to be able to attack again, and since Zelda can only revive 1 at a time, as soon as multiple Mii's are down, the fight ends pretty quickly. After getting myself, Jesus, Zelda, and Eevee to have relationship level 20 with each other with the outing tickets I've accumulated, we get another attempt in. The hands are still unremarkable, although I tried to not use so many hyper shield sprinkles this time. Even still, this attempt wasn't looking too good at the start as I refused to use my hyper sprinkles in case my Mii would attack the coins instead of the Darkest Lord. After a few turns though, I finally got the Sharpened Claws horse whispering combo I had been searching for, while the Darkest Lord was calm from Eevee's Eau de Cologne nonetheless. This eradicated over half of his HP. After the last few coins were taken out and I dealt with the 1 HP attack, I happened to not only get praised, but also got an opportunity to use horse whispering again. This was easily enough to take out the final boss of Miitopia, officially finishing the challenge. So, is it possible to beat Miitopia without buying new gear? Yes, it is. Man, this challenge has been such a weird one for me. I actually started working on it last summer, as in the one in 2021, but I just never had the motivation to finish it for some reason. Therefore, work on this challenge has essentially been 1 month on, a couple of months off until this summer, when I finally decided I needed to finish this before I absolutely don't have time for this. But yeah, this challenge is pretty fun, and I highly recommend it. In general, I think it would be great if more people could play this really great game, so I'm glad it got a Switch port over a year ago now. Anyway, yeah, please play this game. I know that there's a post-game for this game, but as of right now, I haven't even finished it regularly, so it's probably going to be a while before I attempt this challenge in the post-game, if at all. As for our next challenge, I haven't decided exactly what it'll be yet, although I'm pretty sure it's going to be a sequel of sorts to a previous one. I should probably just end the video already. Until next time, goodbye.